Welcome to Cybercast, decoding today's cyber issues. I'm your host, Kate Macri. The last 6 months have been a whirlwind for the federal cybersecurity community. Wanda Jones-Heath, CISO for the Department of the Air Force, was appointed Principal Cyber Advisor right when FireEye discovered the SolarWinds software supply chain breach in December 2020. To say her work was cut out for her is an understatement. In a special interview with Government CIO Media and Research, Jones-Heath described her cyber vision for the Air Force, starting with a department-wide synchronization of all cyber efforts.
The first thing I wanted to do was synchronize all cyber organization efforts and come up with a single vision and voice to the SecAv and to the Undersecretary. We understand that I wanted to reduce the multiple silos within the department. We have some great work going on, but I just wanted to make sure that in my role that I brought all of the entities together. At the end of the day, I wanted to baseline the cyber priorities and ensure that we are aligned with the overarching priorities of the department. It was built on collaboration, understanding the entire cyber landscape. You know, the number one priority, of course, is to establish the office. You know, I came from the cybersecurity world, and so I already had a lot of relationships already built across the department. So that made it easy. And I wanted to ensure that we were transparent to Congress and that we understood the operational requirements, and at all costs, the readiness, the recruiting, and the resourcing of all of the requirements that I know deal with cyber. And then lastly, I wanted to make sure that I'm able to provide a complete cyber site picture for the SecAv, for the CSAF, and the CSO to ensure that all of our priorities are aligned to the leadership's roadmap when it comes to accelerate, change, or lose in this new environment that we find ourselves operating in.
One challenge facing Jones-Heath is siloed data and cyber operations across the department. To be an effective cyber advisor, Jones-Heath needs an intimate understanding of all cyber operations. Centralizing cyber ops and boosting information sharing is a big priority.
You know, looking at the lens of the cyber landscape, we have the operational, we have the technical, we have policy, we have acquisition. And so all of those entities typically operate within their own silo. And so as the principal cyber advisor, my role is to understand each functional area associated with cyber and ensure that there is no seams or gaps. And if they are, then find ways to bring those stakeholders together to be able to come up with the Air Force narrative or voice when it comes to cyber policy, cyber governance, and cyber investments.
Jones-Heath is also tailoring her approach to the cyber weaknesses revealed by the SolarWinds hack, like supply chains.
So supply chain is extremely important. We have a lot of industry partners that we depend on, you know, to help ensure that we're able to have the tools and the capabilities that we need in the cyberspace. And so coming into the position right when that was happening was ironic. You know, I was already involved in all things cybersecurity. So this allowed me to have a different approach. As a member of the senior cyber leadership team, it was imperative that we communicate throughout the entire department community. We had to establish some ground rules to resolve any implications that this hack may have caused. As part of that, you know, a team of us from the senior leadership side met with the leadership of CyberWinds to understand basically what happened, what were they going to do about it, and then what were they going to put in place to ensure that we don't have anything like this for future attacks. As we maneuvered through the SolarWinds updates, we also wanted to ensure that there were no other implications throughout the department's landscape, to include the Space Force. And so we wanted to make sure that we talk to other DIB partners, that we talk to our cybersecurity service provider to ensure that all areas were covered. It's important that we patch our networks and our systems to make sure if they were affected and they won't be affected again, but something similar to SolarWinds. And then finally, wanted to ensure that we close all the loops, working with the other stakeholders throughout the community. The lead command, as well as our cyber component, was very involved in developing the processes and the procedures to continue to reduce the vulnerabilities in the future.
Part of Jones-Heath's job is implementing the Air Force's cyber strategy, which draws on her prior experience as CISO.
So our cyber strategy certainly is in line with the DoD cyber strategy. We also must recognize it has a twofold mission focus, one being our national security requirements as well as our military strategies. Of equal importance is, we support U.S. Cybercom's requirements to employ and deliver forces for those COCOM missions. And we do that really well. The man signal, of course, is high. To keep pace with our adversaries requires that our forces are, there in place and ready to serve. We also have to think about, the joint piece of our work, oversight of our operational readiness, as well as our retention of our forces. So to ensure that we're able to, number one, take care of our U.S. Cybercom requirements, and then ensure that we are able to also have personnel ready for our retained missions, the weapon systems and some of our mission systems we're also responsible for. I had an opportunity in my previous role to coordinate on that, so I'm very familiar with where we were trying to go and where we are going in the future. I think the way that strategy was developed, it allowed us to continue to mature our processes, to mature our activities associated with meeting the needs and the requirements of that strategy. I don't see it changing. However, we do understand that as our infrastructure and our adversaries mature, so does our reactions and actions to be able to meet those needs. So I think that strategy is very sound. I believe that within the department, we are capable of meeting that strategy. And as we continue to mature, we may have to pivot a little bit. The pandemic was a perfect case of how we had to pivot from our infrastructure view. So as the environment changes, but foundationally, the DoD strategy is very sound.
Jones-Heath is also exploring new cyber investments and emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning to bolster the Air Force's cyber posture.
I am the advocate for the entire department, which includes the Space Force as well. When I have conversations, I always ensure that the Space Force is included. I understand that the cyber investments are all about how do we meet that mission based on, when we need to deliver it. We have various ways of looking at how we develop that cyber investment framework. Part of it is modernizing the force and being able to be innovative. We have a lot of legacy equipment. We have outdated processes and policies and things that I think as we mature into a different type of digital force, which includes the Space Force, we want to take advantage of our cutting edge technology, AI, ML, being able to utilize all of that rich data that we have and being able to ensure that we are able to accelerate when we need to with minimal risk in our investment strategies, and find creative ways to develop our teams. Training is a huge part of what we will invest in, our cyber warriors, and ensuring that we do that across the entire department. U.S. Cybercom will provide some of those type of investments, but also the service must also provide investments to ensure that, number one, we're able to meet the needs of the COCOMs, and secondly, be able to meet the needs of the internal force.
Aside from new cyber investments and new tech, Jones-Heath said cryptographic modernization efforts are a major priority.
Crypto allows us to ensure that from one end to the other, that the messages, that the data is protected, is encrypted, and that the ability to read those encrypted messages are intact. Think of it from a banking sense as an example. Very simple. When you make a transaction, you want to ensure that on the other end of that transaction is the bank. And the bank wants to ensure that on their end, the other end of the transaction, that you are who you say you are, and that data, that transition of that data is encrypted, that path is encrypted, and that is unbreakable unless you have the key to be able to unlock that message. And so the same thing with our weapon systems, the same things with our business systems, the encryption, is very, very important to make sure that the adversary is not able to intercept, to unlock, and read any type of data that is germane to the department. This has been a high priority as well. Certainly a huge topic of interest is our crypto modernization. We do understand that, crypto is a very important cybersecurity feature that we need in our weapon systems. One thing that I'm doing as the PCA is I'm bringing together a department-wide cyber executive working group that will help us prioritize our modernization efforts in this space. This includes, stakeholders from across the Air Force, acquisition, our operators, all of that is a part of what we need to do from a crypto modernization effort. We're working very, very closely with NSA and trying to ensure that as great partners that we are addressing any concerns with our weapon systems. The forum will allow us to assist to prioritize the efforts that we need to ensure that mission critical assets are not at risk. So we're looking at it from a big picture standpoint. And we know that, from an influence approach, that we need to understand the limitations based on the risk, based on the threat, and then address the budget concerns as well as the workforce concerns, ensuring that we do have the folks that can make those necessary mitigation changes. And at the end of the day, the goal is to make sure that the stakeholders are aware, understand what our priorities are, and then make the right investments at the right time to ensure that at the end of the day, we can meet the mission of the department.
Another concern for Jones-Heath is the stark cyber workforce shortage. CISA estimates there are upwards of 500,000 unfilled cybersecurity jobs across the public and private sectors. Lacking adequate cyber talent is not just an organizational issue, it's a national security risk.
Talent management is huge, and we are, you are absolutely correct. We're having a lot of conversations within the department about talent management. So, I'll talk about the military side first, recruiting and ensuring that we are pulling the best and the brightest consistently is something we want to do from year to year. We want to develop our airmen to be great warriors and great guardians. And there's no different when it comes to our civilian workforce. The demand signal for the civilian piece certainly is higher within the DoD, but we have folks that answer the call. We have a great mission. We have many, many civilians who are very professional and understand the cyber world, and they raise their hand. I'm a perfect example. I don't have any military experience, but I've been a Department of the Air Force civilian for almost 31 years. And so, I answer the call from that perspective. I don't wear the uniform, but I wear the civilian uniform. And so we try to ensure that we have different approaches to recruit. targeting specific skill sets, understanding what skill sets we need, from being able to have those folks that understand data, understand artificial intelligence, that understand software development. And so all of those skills we take into account. We have a very, very active intern program where we recruit straight from college and develop those folks into great civilians for our force. And so, and we want to use, different types of incentives to bring those folks into the fold, and then develop them, keep them, retrain them when we need to, and then let them be great partners and collaborators with our military.
Filling cyber jobs is one thing, enabling cyber readiness is another. Jones-Heath is responsible for ensuring cyber readiness across the entire Department of the Air Force, including the Space Force, which requires a continuum of training, she said.
So what we don't want to do is have multiple standards. And so U.S. Cybercom set the standards for all of the DoD mission forces. And so we follow that. And we ensure that the airmen are not overwhelmed or can be full up round operators when called upon. And there are 4 contributing factors for that. Of course, personnel readiness, things like fitness and education, your security clearance, your AFSC training, your specialty. Second would be the operational readiness. What are you trained on specifically? What type of weapon systems you will be a part of as part of the mission force? And then, the operation position readiness. Here's where you really get into the day-to-day work roles on the team that you're assigned. And then, of course, lastly, is your team readiness. You have multiple entities inside of a team. It could be up to 39 individuals. And so as a team, we assess your readiness to be able to execute the requirements levied by U.S. Cybercom or any other COCOM, or your individual service requirements. And so all of that taken into account, and it's not a one-time good deal. It's really a continuum of training to ensure that as we need new skills, then we increase the opportunities for different types of training. And we depend on, our schoolhouses to provide that, as well as internal development courses that we may have in the inventory.
Shifting to telework brought its own challenges to the Air Force's cyber readiness, but Jones-Heath is optimistic about 2021 and only sees possibilities.
And the great thing about, the pandemic allowed us to see the realm of possibility. We, along with, everyone, never could have predicted that we would swing so far into the telework space. Of course, any huge change like that certainly brings challenges. And, understanding that because of all the work that we had already accomplished, as I talked about as part of the DoD cyber strategy and the DoD modernization efforts that were already underway, we were already looking at what infrastructure changes we needed to do in order to keep up with technology, in order to keep up with industry standards. So we were well on our way. And the pandemic just allowed us to leapfrog into where we are today, being able to sustain a force of 700,000 worldwide that are able to continue to do the mission from their homes, from, in some cases, some folks, remain in the office. But we actually proved that we could do it, and we can do it in a manner that was conducive to being able to still meet the mission at the end of the day.
Wanda Jones-Heath is already almost 6 months into her new job, but her expertise and peerless grasp on the top cyber issues facing the Department of the Air Force make her unstoppable. To hear more about federal cybersecurity, subscribe to Cybercast, Decoding Today's Cyber Issues. I'm your host, Kate Macri. Thank you for listening.
Cybercast is a production of Government CIO Media and Research. For more podcasts, head to governmentcio.com/podcasts. If you're interested in sponsoring a podcast, contact us at sponsor@governmentcio.com.